And so just that intro, which is just it took weeks to do. Nuno walked in the control room and goes, "Oh my God, you got the Bradshaw, it's fantastic." Phil just looked at me like, we'd have mixed the whole album. In fact, Guns N' Roses had just mixed an album in that studio, and it was definitely wrong. Big monitors were weird.
Hey everyone, just a quick message to say that this concludes the Adrenalize portion of my chat with Pete Woodroffe. We have a lot more to come where he talks about the other albums he was involved with. I think there will at least be a part 3 and part 4. It depends on how the edit goes, but just thought I'd let you know that there's a lot more to come. Enjoy.
Adrenalize was mixed. We were in LA. The band were done pretty much, and Mike was mixing it. I was there, and we had 2 32-track digital multi-tracks, so they're big old expensive tape machines, and we had one basically was all the guitars, one was all the vocals, and then we had 2 Akais running, triggering all the drum sounds, and so we could have total control, change things. Mutt came out and was there for the mixing, and I think we'd originally mixed Let's Get Rock first, and it was going to be the first single, and then Mutt said, "Oh, let's have another go, man." So we hit another crack at it, and deadlines, of course, were at this point, it's got to be done. The record company were going crazy, and they'd said, "Look, you're going to mix it again. Well, it's got to be mastered on tomorrow." So they said, "Don't worry, send a bike. We'll have it ready." Anyway, we're listening to the track. It's pretty much done. The phone rings. Mike stops the tape, goes, "Yep." And it was the record company saying, "The biker is on his way from LA airport now to pick up the tape. Is it ready?" He said, yeah, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. Yeah, 20 minutes, fine. Puts the phone down, presses play, and a mosquito had landed on one of the multi-track tape heads. Now, because it was digital, instead of it just being sort of, I don't know, a hi-hat that went or something, it went complete distortion for about a second of everything. On all the vocals suddenly went, it was because the control track had been corrupted in technical terms. So at this point, I had Mutt and Mike turning to me, go, "Got a safety copy?" I was like, "Yeah." And I had luckily got a safety copy of everything. And so we just switched the safety copy on, and it was fine. Stressful times. And that's from that point on, Mitsubishi put little Perspex covers on their tape machine so that mosquitoes couldn't land on the tape head.
Was that because of the feedback from you guys?
Yeah, they know the story.
You had a really cool story about when Extreme came to visit during the Adrenalize.
Yeah.
Would you mind telling that?
So having started with the Randalls, and then the second year, Phil had bought a Bradshaw guitar rack, which was the thing at the time. It was this big double width, $15,000 box with an amazing pedal board that you change sounds on, and he used it live. But it basically it was a switching unit. So you had 3 amps. You'd have a Randall and a Soldano and a Marshall and maybe a Digitech, and then you'd have effects and you'd have a power amp, and it was really the bee's knees and was great. And Extreme turned up in Dublin. They were playing a show, and Joe said, "Oh, come to the house." So they came up, and Nuno walked in the control room and goes, "Oh my God, you got the Bradshaw, it's fantastic." And Phil just looked at me like, and so we were actually using a Rockman Ace, which is like a cheap version of, it was a little $59 box, battery powered. And so I just kind of kicked it under the Bradshaw rack, and Phil goes, "Oh yeah, we use it all the time. It's marvelous." We actually hadn't been using it for about a year, but it was on, the lights were pretty, and it was warm.
I just think that's great.
It was to get, but on its own, one Rockman sound wasn't the bee's knees, but when you have this tapestry you're making, I guess it did work. There was another reason why it took so long. We had, first of all, at the beginning of the album, we'd done the Holland bit. We then came to Dublin, and Mike said, really, we should, if you're going to make this properly, we should have a digital multi-track. And I think the Mitsubishi cost 80 grand or something, a lot of money, 80,000 quid. So someone came over from London, installed the Mitsubishi, and opened the little doors underneath with all these cards in, and set it all up, and said, "Right, fantastic choice. I'm very pleased the band have chosen Mitsubishi." And off he went back to London, and we worked on it. Great, striped up the tape, started working, and Mike and I went home that night, left the machine on, left the desk on like you do, so that it doesn't get much wear and tear. Came back the next day, and as I said before, the house was actually being built. There's no one living in the house. It was all being decorated and set up and wired up, and and we were greeted by 3 builders looking a little uneasy. And they said, now, would it be all right if a drop of water went in that? Drop of water? Anyway, I opened the doors, and the bottom half right-hand side, all the cards were charred, and what had happened, there'd been a flood upstairs, and it just happened to be the one halogen downlighter above the Mitsubishi that the water came through. And so the next day, the guy had to come back out again and fix it. But also the power in that area, it's sort of in the hills outside Dublin, and the power was just a nightmare. We worked on a song, you stripe up the tape, and then you put the drums down, and then Phil's there, and we're doing a guide bass and Phil playing his parts, and you get maybe 20 tracks and it's all sounding really good. And we'd be in record and the power would go off. And again, just like with the Mosquito, if you're in record on a digital multi-track, it corrupts the control track, so it's lost. So, we rang up the electricity guys and said, could you give us a warning? And said, yeah, sure, fine. And it then happened a week later. And every time we'd lost all that work. And so eventually I said, look, we've got a guy here who's on an artificial lung. And if you turn the power off, he'll die. So please ring us before you can turn the power off. Oh, okay, we'll do that. Week later, working away, power goes off. And a minute later, the phone rings. Is he all right? And then we got a power. We thought, okay, this is not, we need to have a battery thing that will give us power when the power cuts. So we had this battery thing, and everything in the control room was put on this battery. And a couple of weeks later, we're working away, and everything slows down, and it's like, what? And we put the battery thing in, but no one had thought to put a light that would flash when the battery kicked in. So the power had gone out. We had no idea. We was working in the studio with all the lights, everything on this battery thing. And again, so it was just a nightmare.
Well, it's starting to sound more like reasonable that, it took that much time to...
Yeah, there was a lot of that stuff that went on.
Do you remember any weird recording techniques you guys did for, whether not guitars or anything, or vocals, anything odd?
Not really, because it was really quite sensible and sort of Palmer Speaker Simulator. There was no, let's hang the microphones out. I remember recording the car we had Joe driving up the drive recording for Let's Get Rocked.
Yeah.
The car goes past, yeah. And like in very low gear to make it go, I can't remember what car we used. And the bass was kind of, a guide bass would be programmed, and then using a really cool bass sample, Sav and I would sit there and just go through and program every like micro program the bends and the dwees and the doors, because everything's on a drum machine. It needs to be just nailed tight. And it was as if Hysteria was a work of genius, but it was like a monster that had to be emulated, and to emulate that monster takes a huge amount of work. That would be if I was a psychiatrist. The night off Adrenalize took months to do. The guitar sound at the intro, the sort of Led Zepp, that was about 5 guitars. Phil would do it with one guitar, and he'd play it, and then it sounds a little bit unlike Def Leppard, doesn't sound that. Why don't we just go do? Okay, put that in a computer, not a computer, in a sampler, and each note was done separately, and we double track it, so you'd have one sampler doing one side, one doing the other. The turnaround was played, and then we'd program it, and trying to get it to sound natural would take hours, and you'd have this lovely guitar, and go, yeah, that sounds cool. And then we come back to it a month later, and Mike would go, I think it needs an edgier guitar as well. And so each time was this huge process of recording it, Phil patiently playing notes, and then tracking it up, and then putting it in the sampler. And so just that intro, which is just it took weeks to do. And then and Mike's thing the whole time was, I want Mutt to really love this. And then when Mutt heard it, I remember him saying, oh, that sounds like a guitar. If only it was just a guitar. So when Tonight came out as a single, It was on a CD single, and the B-sides were Two Steps Behind, Miss You in a Heartbeat, and Action, I think. And they all went on to have their little lives elsewhere. So, yes. But Tonight's amazing. It just didn't, it got to number 50 or something, whereas Action got to number 15, I don't know. I had a chance before Adrenalize. A guy I'd worked with before had said, "Oh, do you want to come and do this album as an engineer?" And then Mike, and I thought I wanted to learn how you make a record like Hysteria. How do you, what? It was a completely different league of record making, and so my 3 years with Mike's, sonically a genius. He hears everything. I remember there was one point where we were running just the drum stuff, and the program before Rick came in and did all his fills and stuff, and Mike goes, "Oh, hold on, in the bridge the hi-hat's late." I go, "No, it's not." He goes, yeah, it's late. And so I go to my Atari computer at the time, and it's like, "Oh yeah, right, it's a millisecond late." Heard it like that. He was really, he's tragically no longer with us, but just great at his ears. But so learning how the way Mike and Mark would EQ things, this subtractive EQ, the way he worked was really unique and great to learn.
Because when we had the 30th anniversary of Hysteria, there's a lot of cool stuff that came out about that. That's when I first heard about the rock box. So I think both Nigel Green and Sav mentioned it in an interview and said, "Oh, I never heard that before."
So where did you get yours? eBay?
Yeah, I think it was either eBay or Gumtree or something like that. Because I wasn't sure whether that was the one.
Go on. Yep, and the top. That's it.
So with the idea with the rock boxes, from what I read from, I think Nigel, was that there was a certain thing, like, because of the effects loop on the rock box meant that you could bypass, let's say,
you could do an insert on it.
An insert, right? Okay.
Yeah. If you're just doing an album with a Rockman, this gives you another sound, and it gives you, and the insert, that's right, you can put effects on it, so you can have stuff.
Okay. Right. As opposed to, let's say, adding them post rock box or post rock effects.
Is it the rock box or the Rockman? One of them, the chorus, the left side is normal and the right side is chorused. And if you only listen to the right side, it's all out of tune.
Okay, yeah.
I remember that being a worry.
Do you remember if the Rockmans you guys were using were modded in any way?
No, they weren't. It was the Mark II was the main one, which has a switch that you can kind of feel. It has a weird second bit to it. It was the Mark II, and then we had a Rockman Ace, which was the standard cheap one. No, there's no fancy pants modification.
All right. When it comes to, let's say, for a song on Adrenalize where you have so many guitars, how would it be that you guys would carve out space for the vocal or for anything else? Would that be more so of an arrangement thing with the guitar parts, or would there have to be a lot of like post-production to get that?
I think arrangement thing, and there's the sound that when you listen to your dozen guitar tracks, the thing of going back and retrying things, if anything was too brash and too high, it was all making it sound like this lovely bed. The low end, I always remember Mutt saying, why is it with guitars you always have the nice warm low end when you record it, and then when you mix it you just take the low end out because the guitars have to sit in their sort of window of where they are. I think it's also, if you have a guitar that's a Marshall that's going, it's like distorted and crunchy, then the vocal is kind of hidden away. These were always smooth and clean, and not clean, but the distortion was tame.
I try to savor whenever I listen to Def Leppard, because I listen to them so much in order to like learn things. So it's like kind of analytical.
You're amazing. Your knowledge and your videos are just fantastic.
You're very kind.
That's what I'm doing, because it's like respect for your dedication to the cause.
I appreciate that. I didn't used to get it much when I was younger, so that's something to do. But it's the idea, every now and then I'll get a chance to listen to on a nice pair of headphones or something, and still the records, they still really get me going. It's like, you know, I can still hear new things. You know, maybe on a different set of headphones is a lot.
Even like, because Hysteria, there's just so much detail, it's incredible. But Adrenalize, even the stuff. I was listening to it today before this, and I remember on the Akai S1000, you could, if you lock two samples together and you played it, it's like, oh wow, this fantastic flangey sound, and lots of stuff was little effecty bits using that and triggering that and just doing it. Basically what it is there's virtually no, it's all guitars, there's no keyboards pretty much. Like the Queen thing of no synthesizers, but it Phil's Sustainiac pickup, do you know about that? Yeah, so if we want to have a pad or something, he'll play a single melodic line, and then we'll track it up, and then he'll play the next note, and so you'll end up with sort of 6 or 8 tracks of a melodic part, and then you put it backwards, and you know, it's so work like that just takes forever, but it's great. You know, it's a fun thing, and it was okay when CDs were selling and you could earn money from it. I think it got harder when, you know, how do you justify spending a year on a record when they don't generate money, because streaming doesn't. I guess it sells tickets if it's great, but yeah, so a lot of it I think is limiting yourself to guitar pretty much. You know, piano on Missing a Heartbeat, but generally Adrenalize and Euphoria is an awful lot of guitar stuff.
I mean, it's funny because they always would say about Adrenalize in comparison to Hysteria, it's like it was a bit more straightforward with the guitar riffs and such, and just kind of getting to the point quicker. But like you say, there is a lot on Adrenalize. I mean, something like Have You Ever Needed Someone So Bad, in that kind of last chorus, there's so many little bits, and you know, you can't, it's hard to like pick them out all at once, but they come together and give you that sound, and it's unbelievable, really.
Yeah, it is. And it is, as you say, it's hard to pick it up, because if you do have a root note and then you have a jangle and then you have a counterpart, you know, all at once, it just becomes this texture of lovely melodic guitar stuff. I remember a great one when we first arrived to mix Adrenalize. Mutt wasn't there, and we're at Skip Saylor's in LA, a studio, and Mike was like, "There's something wrong in this room. It's not right." And he just couldn't get a handle on the low end. And I thought, oh, he's being a bit, you know, having a diva fit. And I said, okay, well, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go to Tower Records. I'm going to buy Mr. Broken Wings that you mixed. And he's like, yeah, and we'll listen to that. So, and you know, do, and you listen to it, and the bass note went do, and the next one went, and the next one went do. And he's like, whoa, it's all uneven. And he knew that it was absolutely even. And there was a problem with the monitors. They'd got something, a mismatch of something, and a guy came in the next day, took it all apart, put it back together, going, it's fixed now. And sure enough, it was fine. But we had mixed the whole album. In fact, Guns N' Roses had just mixed an album in that studio, and it was definitely wrong. Big monitors were weird. But yeah, so Mr. Broken Wings is always a good record for testing out the low end in a studio.
Okay.
We had a break at Christmas, and we turned up to mix. Mike was like, I think, you know, he wanted Mutt to hear it. So he rang up Mutt and played the first mix down the phone, which was, I think, Let's Get Rocked. And Mike went, oh, hold on, Pete, can you get me a pad of paper? And Mutt had pages of notes. And Mike put the phone down. I said, oh, do you think Mutt wants to get involved? And he was out sort of 24 hours later. He turned up, which is great, because he'd co-written all the songs, and it was fantastic. I was at the time going, oh God, these they'd done the backing vocals. I was going, man, they're out of tune. They're and it's like, don't worry, it'll never come out. It's not even a D side. It'll be fine. I said, oh, if that gets released with my name on it, I quit.